Hello and welcome back. Thanks for returning to this Rangelands conference, coming live from Longreach and into your place, wherever you may be. The next session is going to be all about the climate. I would like to introduce our first speaker. He is a man who is very well known. Professor Roger Stone is the country's eminent climate expert. He is based at the University of Southern Queensland and he heads up its Centre for Applied Climate Sciences. He also sits on the UN World Meteorological Organization. So please, a warm welcome, and I guess an even warmer welcome to Professor Stone, if he can forecast some rain for the Central West. I'm sure he's sick of hearing that. But here to talk to us about the Drought Hub that is soon to be launched, which will cover the central New South Wales to the Gulf. I'd like to introduce Professor Roger Stone.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. Thank you very much. Money to forecast the rain, I'm afraid, but thank you for that. So this is a discussion about the Drought Hub for the rangelands, from central New South Wales to the Gulf, and that's that we took some effort to include the rangelands at the outset of this Commonwealth initiative. Now, rather than show you a whole lot of dot points, which is mostly what this new drought hub has so far, with the information we have from Canberra and so on, I thought I'd slip in a few of my favourite climate slides. So there's a few graphs and maps. I hope that's okay with everyone. And just to put some sort of context. And Ross Garnaut mentioned this, I think, a little bit this morning. It's been mentioned since then, that Australia has the world's highest levels of year-to-year climate variability, especially rainfall variability. This is Jeff Lovelock, former director of the Bureau of Meteorology. It's good work, very simple coefficients of variability there. Australia first, then South Africa, Germany, France, New Zealand, India, and so on. I guess a lot of the audience has heard this before, but we more from the year-to-year variability in rainfall than anywhere else on Earth. And this is just natural variability. This is what we have already to contend with. On top of that, there's some good work by Nichols. I call Neville the grandfather of climate research. Slightly different analysis, but it comes up with some more interesting detail, you might say. And this looks at the way you read this map, any area shaded white, if you happen to be in a white area at the moment, you have less variability than you would expect given your latitude and annual average rainfall. Any area not shaded white has greater variability than you would expect on a global scale. So this is looking, I think, at about 40,000 rain gauges around the world. You might notice there those orangey areas, the big orange area is a lot of the rangelands, if not all of it, pretty much most of it there. So huge variability there. And the areas shaded red have the highest rainfall variability in Australia, and Australia has the highest variability on Earth. So that includes the desert uplands. I don't know which rain gauges will be included there. It'd be interesting to find out. The Southern Gulf, which is an incredibly important area. This analysis was done some years ago, I have to say. So the Southern Gulf is prone to extreme variability, and the area there from St Lawrence to Townsville. So those areas in a slightly different, so the first one, have pretty well the highest year-to-year. The first year is too wet, and the next year is too dry. And this picks up the whole issue of preparedness. When we have an extreme wet year and the media get quite excited about the good years coming back, that's often the start of the next drought. In fact, it was John Bjelke-Petersen, not John Bjelke-Petersen, that taught me this. The banks of the Fitzroy, as it was, back in 1991, he said, most of Australia's droughts, and we're speaking about drought here more than anything else, most of Australia's droughts are preceded and finish with floods. So most of our droughts start and finish with a flood, which is quite a sobering sort of message. So just when we're getting the good seasons, they're the times we really have to be prepared. One of the key features of the FDF, Future Drought Fund work, is preparedness. It's all about preparedness, being aware of this natural variability. On top of the variability, David Cobin, a good colleague, has done this good work. He's seen whether the variability is increasing. He did some good work on rainfall, but also on pasture growth. So you might see there this sort of area we've just been speaking about, the desert uplands and that area between St Lawrence and Townsville, and also parts of the Southern Gulf, where this variability that we know is the highest on Earth, if I can put it that way, is actually increasing. It's actually getting more intense. So our droughts are getting drier and our wet seasons are getting wetter, certainly as far as the grass species are concerned, which is quite interesting. Actually, it's interesting travelling around those areas. The people seem quite normal, pretty tough people, I think, that grow up in this sort of world. Pretty tough and nice people to cope with that sort of variability, but even more so the agricultural systems, the sugar systems and the grass systems and so on, that have to so far put up with that sort of variability. So please see David Cobin, or in fact anyone called David would probably be able to answer what's going on with the grass species there, which I can't. If you look at long-term changes due to climate change, if I can venture into this territory just briefly, this is the Hadley Centre multi-model ensemble work. The Hadley Centre is in the UK Met Office. Thanks to Margaret Thatcher, would you believe? She set up one of the world's best climate research areas called the Hadley Centre down in Exeter. And you can see this sort of work that focuses on things such as the Palmer Drought Severity Index and similar, that shows an increase in drought occurrence and severity of drought using precipitation potential, evaporation anomalies and so on. And it's very much a moisture stress issue in the atmosphere demanding more moisture, I understand. So there's probably more interesting work that's occurred since then, but I thought that Burke and Brown's work on the Met Office is particularly good. And in fact, we have very close relationships with the Met Office and the US Drought Mitigation Centre. Now the Future Drought Fund. So here come the dot points. So I'll skip through these fairly quickly, and I hope Nicole or someone will keep me on time. This is very much, there's two key words associated with the Future Drought Fund, and that is preparedness. The other one is community. So we're good in Australia at having what's called proactive reactivity. This is about being prepared ahead of time and getting together with communities. These are some of the programs. $100 million per annum, would you believe? It's already kicked off. It's already been launched a couple of months ago by David Littleproud, which was a wonderful event. So here's some of the programs, not all of them by any means. The Climate Services for Agriculture, mainly including the Bureau of Meteorology and CSIRO. A lot of digital platform-based seasonal forecasting. I'd personally prefer to see that expanded somewhat, maybe include some of the universities and other agencies that work in this area. The Drought Resilient Leaders Program, the big one really that focuses on the local communities is the Drought Resilient Research and Adoption Program. They're all lengthy titles. So there's 8 adoption and innovation hubs around Australia. The University of Southern Queensland was lucky to be awarded one of those hubs in Toowoomba. And that provides networks for, I'll put primary producers first, primary producers, researchers and community groups who work together. And then there's the NRM Drought Resilience Program, which is providing 10 million to support organisations and farmer groups, although that program is closed, but no doubt these things will come around again. But they have programs ranging from $50,000 to $100,000, perhaps $200,000 for farmer groups to engage in this sort of work. Because a key part of this whole area, this whole Future Drought Fund, is to get producer groups, farmer groups to provide their input and their knowledge and deep understanding of better ways to prepare for drought. So here's a little map that shows where these, where the Southern Queensland and Northern New South Wales hub has its nodes. And as I mentioned, its sort of central places, it's good old Toowoomba, but notice there location number 6, which is Longreach. We made a point of including Longreach, and we'd like to go even further to the Southern Gulf if we can. But it includes Longreach, Roma, Narrabri, Armidale, Lismore and Stanthorpe. So with each of the various areas being represented, the various industries being represented. But the rangelands are important, very important component that previously, hitherto, I thought might have been maybe neglect is probably too strong a word in Canberra, but this is a lot of the rangelands all fits in with the one climatic zone, or the BSH zone, semi-arid zone, hot semi-arid zone, the good old Cobin climate classification system. And the whole basis of these hubs was that they'd be cohesive in terms of various climatic types. So there's a climatic zone all by itself there, the BSH semi-arid zone of Australia, which just happens to be where most of the rangeland folk are as well, and the industries are, the rangelands, grasses and so on, also extends around through Northern Territory and towards the Kimberley there. So it's important, I thought, when we were setting up the hub and nominating, that we had a special mention for the rangelands to be included. So a key part, as I mentioned, is the Longreach node. I don't know whether Ali Murray is in the audience, but she's a local, just been appointed as the local node manager to work with community groups to gain their input and so on into in what's needed from the research world, what's needed from the engagement world, what's needed in the financial planning world, and vice versa. So this particular node, which we're very grateful to RAPAD for hosting this, the RAPAD group in Longreach, that will extend out through the RAPAD territory, will focus on the semi-arid grazing regions of Western Queensland. And a key point is that this is not just building on not creating new work. There's a lot of work that's been done in Queensland. I have to put in a plug for Queensland, if I may. And programs such as Drought Plan and Graze On, and all the stuff that's been going on in the good old DPI days, and CSRO, Tropical Crops and Pastures, and so on. The Queensland Centre for Climate Applications in DPI and NRM. And then the programs that have come since then, the Drought and Climate Adaptation Program, that DAF have a lot of involvement in, I'm very, very pleased to say, which led then to the Northern Australian Climate Program, which is doing a lot of this work involving Meat and Livestock Australia, the MLA Donor Company, and the University of Southern Queensland, all been involved in developing these programs before the FDF system got going. So we're not going to throw this away, but we have to ramp this up again. I'd really like the Drought Plan slide there, the banner. I don't know who designed that. I think it was great, but it still has the old CD-ROMs and so on there. But so that needs to be updated. But I think a lot of that good work can't be ignored. The work started back in 1988, I'm saying there, probably even earlier than that. But there we go. So a lot of good work been done in this part of the world and extending through to New South Wales and other areas in Northern Australia on this very topic. So these are the duties of the FDF nodes. Remember, there's a node here in Longreach and one in Roma. Provide networks and put the primary producers here first, community groups and research people to work together, okay, which is good. Utilise the previous work. I put that one in. I don't think that came from Canberra initially, but it's in there now. Become flagship precincts for agriculture and innovation. Not sure what that means. Flagship project precinct for agriculture and innovation. Perhaps we can explore that further. And then the key word is each hub will focus on collaboration. So it's getting some really good ideas on new forms of cell grazing or better understanding about our climate patterns in areas where we don't have much network coverage, all those sorts of issues. Some intriguing things that are going on with our pastures and so on and so forth. So that's the key role of the nodes. And I say there'll be one locally here in Toowoomba, one in Narrabri for the folks down there, and Armidale for the grazing, sheep grazing, and so on and so forth. And there, of course, there are other hubs around Australia. James Cook University, I'm pleased to say, has a major hub. And hopefully together we can get up into the critical Gulf region as well. So this is a summary, Nicole and others, a summary of what these node responsibilities are. Organised and facilitated targeted drought and climate risk extension. So the key word there is targeted. A lot of this stuff can be very generalised. We need to target it down to local key issues and utilise the previous good work. We can't throw all that away. It's incredibly good work over the years. CSRO, DPI, New South Wales DPI, Victorian DPI, all the DPIs, the state organisations that Ross Gardner mentioned this morning, the Bureau of Meteorology work going back to the days with Neville Nichols and before. Knowledge brokering and collating, planning and co-designing. So the words co-design, all these words that the social scientists really know well, co-designing and co-innovation, which I'm not an expert in, and data collection, documentation, and so on. And with that, I thank you very much. We're having a panel session later, I understand. Yeah.
Absolutely right. Thank you very much, Professor Stone, for introducing us to the node. And it is very exciting that there is one based in Longreach. We're going to turn to the question and answer session now. And I'll just ask if there's any other groups in the wings, if they could mute, their interference is coming through. So we open it up to the audience now. If there are any questions coming from Professor Stone's presentation. I have one. Professor Stone, you've mentioned who had been appointed. When can we expect to see that person having started work, or have they started already?
They've started already. I think one of the problems we have, Nicole, is accommodation issues in Longreach. So if you know of a good spot or a house for rent, so they're here, but I think they're some distance from the centre of Longreach. But Ali started work, for example, and connecting in with people like David Phelps and the Rapad group. So that connectivity has already started. So I'm hoping Ali might be in the audience somewhere, but I believe she's found accommodation a long way out of town. But that's quite an interesting issue, actually, just when we're setting up something of this nature, accommodation issues become critical. So it's you've got to look at the big picture here.
Now, I can hear you no problem at all, Professor Stone, and probably our people from all different parts of the country are having no trouble hearing you either. But out of my fishbowl here, I'm seeing a few kind of worried-looking faces at me, so I think something may have gone wrong in the main hall. But we will press on. Chelsea, your colleague, is letting us know that the feed is very much cutting out. Thanks for letting us know, Chelsea. What is your biggest hope, Professor Stone, for the node and for what it will deliver, I guess, from this region to the broader understanding of climate?
It's climate and drought preparedness. It's the key word is preparedness, so that we keep getting caught out over and over again, and yet we know the patterns in the Pacific Ocean in particular, and to some extent the Indian Ocean, but mostly the Pacific, the Central Pacific. We know the patterns that develop out there and what they can lead to, especially in terms of drought. We're probably better prepared, despite the fact that we have high variability. The reason for that variability is understood, so we can predict to a fair extent in terms of risk management what's going to happen, so perhaps 6 months ahead in some, or maybe longer, as we get better forecast systems. So those systems need to be explained through workshops. I don't think online and online systems and so on work so well, and websites. It has to be face-to-face sort of interaction, the sort of work that goes on in the NACP, the Northern Australian Climate Program, where the climate mates are having their interaction, the managing the climate workshops that DAF still run, I think, with Neil Cliff and co and Damien O'Sullivan that set that up back in the 1990s. That still needs to run. You cannot beat face-to-face interaction, and then people get an ownership if you start doing their own climate forecasting, so that they're, to some extent, pardon me, so that everyone's much better prepared for the drought seasons when they return, perhaps with more venom than we've had before. So that's my key wish, that a lot of the research that's been done around the world in this area makes sense to folk, and they can feed back their understanding of what goes on with the climate in their area, because it's different in the desert uplands than it is in Charters Towers, than it is in Walgett or Narrabri. So that all matters, and that sort of information needs to be fed back. And from that, we can actually start to make a difference. But it needs that community engagement, almost one-to-one engagement, as the old extension days used to be in DPI.
And that certainly has been a focus of USQ's climate school that you head up, absolutely. I'm interested to know, this is probably a little off topic, but while we're waiting for other questions to come in, how would you rate Australian primary producers or ecologists or people involved in natural resources, how would you rate generally their understanding and knowledge of meteorological systems and uses of tools, given what is available online now that wasn't, 30 years ago?
Yes, I think Australian farmers and producers are some of the best in the world at understanding this and linking into this sort of information. And again, it goes back to the pioneering work back in the 80s and 90s that some folks in the audience, in Longreach at least, were part of. So because of that pioneering work and the state government departments and so on, particularly, we're pretty much ahead, very much ahead in terms of the general understanding of what causes our droughts and floods and so on, and getting some ownership of how to use this information. I think, because if I may say, I work in the World Meteorological Organization as well, I think Australia possibly leads the world. So we need to take advantage of that somehow.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Professor Stone, for your time. I look forward to seeing you around as the conference progresses.
Thanks, Nicole. Hope we're not breaking up here too much. I hope that's sorted out. Yeah.